Hello, I'm Tanya Sharp. Welcome to this presentation of our series on Individual Education Program, IEP, Consideration of Special Factors, ensuring all pieces of the puzzle connect. In this presentation, we will discuss the behavior needs and supports special factor the Admissions and Release Committee, or ARC, is required to consider, which is, does the child's behavior impede his or her learning or that of others? Special education teachers and school staff are tasked with providing behavior supports through both the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. The regulations require the consideration of strategies to address the student's behavior if it impedes the learning of the student or of others. From this regulation, when we develop an IEP, we must answer the first consideration of special factors for IEP development. The positive behavioral intervention strategies and supports that are written in this area should be similarly reflected in the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, which we will refer to as the present levels, as well as in the measurable annual goals and benchmarks of an IEP. Strategies may include a functional behavior assessment, or FBA, a behavior intervention plan, also known as the BIP, a behavioral contract, or social skills instructions as appropriate. The IDEA Part B Federal Registrar from 2006 emphasizes that whether a child needs positive behavioral interventions and supports is an individual determination that is made by each child's IEP team. Section 300.321, subsection A2I, requires the IEP team, in the case of a child whose behavior impedes the child's learning or that of others, to consider the use of positive behavioral supports and other strategies to address the behavior. We believe that this requirement emphasizes and encourages school personnel to use positive behavioral interventions and supports. In addition, the regulations reflect the department's position that high-quality professional development, including the use of scientifically based instructional practices, is important to ensure that personnel have the skills and knowledge necessary to improve the academic achievement and functional performance of children with disabilities. It also requires each local education agency, or LEA, to ensure that all personnel necessary to carry out Part B of the Act are appropriately and adequately prepared. From this regulation, when we develop an IEP, the ARC must answer the first consideration of special factors for IEP development. The ARC must answer, does the child's behavior impede his or her learning or that of others? If the present levels indicate behavior needs or adverse impact, then this should be marked yes. If yes, the ARC must consider, if appropriate, strategies including positive behavioral intervention strategies, or PBIS, and supports to address that behavior. The PBIS that are written in this area should be similarly reflected in the present levels, as well as in the measurable annual goals and benchmarks of an IEP. The student can have behavior needs but not have had an FBA or have a BIP. The ARC must answer yes if the student has any behavior needs that impede their learning or the learning of others. If the present levels indicate behavior needs or adverse impact due to behaviors, this special factor should be marked yes, regardless if the ARC has completed an FBA or developed a BIP. As mentioned in the previous slide, the IDEA and the regulations place a strong emphasis on research-based supports and interventions, including PBIS. If the ARC marks yes to behavior needs and supports, then the ARC must address the need for a particular device or service section of the special factors as well. For more information, see video 8 on the need for a particular device or service. To develop and document strategies, including PBIS, to address the behavior, the ARC must determine the student's needs regarding behavior. Throughout the training, we will refer to some of the guiding questions for the ARC that are available in the Consideration of Special Factors section of the Guidance for IEP Development document on the OCEAL, ARC, and IEP webpage. This is not a complete list nor an exact list of all the guiding questions available in the guidance document. The following guiding questions may help guide the ARC when making special considerations to determine the student's needs regarding behavior, such as what behavior or behaviors does the student exhibit that is different from those of similar age non-disabled peers? When is the student most likely and less likely to engage in appropriate behavior? And what specific events appear to be contributing to the student's problem behavior? What might the student be communicating through the problem behavior? What was the student trying to get across with their behavior, such as a want or need, a reaction? Does the student's behavior problem persist despite consistently implemented behavioral management strategies, or do the strategies need to change? What functions does the problem behavior serve for the student? In other words, what are the possible underlying reasons or purposes behind the student's problematic behavior, such as attention, avoidance, sensory needs? Does the student's disability affect the student's ability to control the behavior? Again, these guiding questions are to assist the ARC in determining if the child's behavior impedes his or her learning or that of others. And if it does, then the ARC can use these questions to consider needed strategies, including positive behavioral intervention strategies and supports to address the specific behavior and how those strategies and supports would be used on the individual student needs. If the ARC has determined behavior is a need and has documented the strategies and supports needed, the ARC would then need to ensure the needs, strategies, and supports are connected throughout the IEP. Let's discuss some of the ways ARCs should ensure the IEP is comprehensive, consistent, and compliant. To make those connections, behavioral needs should be integrated and documented throughout the IEP as a part of planning for the student. In order to make those connections throughout the IEP, the ARC will need to ensure the needs or concerns described in present levels align with and support the information included in the special factors section. Does the student have annual goals that support the needs and concerns outlined in the present levels? And is how well the student must perform the skill appropriate based on the baseline data? Again, outlined in the present levels. Does the student have a behavior intervention plan, yet the student's behavior problem persists despite consistently implemented behavioral management strategies? Does the BIP or goals need to be updated? And once the ARC outlines the strategies, interventions, or BIP for the student, what specific program modifications and supports might be needed? These are just some of the ways ARCs should ensure the IEP is comprehensive, consistent, and compliant. Let's look at an example of how those pieces connect. Here's an example of some of the connections. If the ARC documents in the present levels that the student has behavior needs, then the behavior section of the special factors should be marked yes and strategies and supports documented. Let's look at one specific behavior strategy the ARC may have documented. Pre-correction is a classroom management strategy used to proactively prevent challenging behaviors. It involves teaching, modeling, and practicing expected behaviors. The IRIS Center explains that using pre-correction can prevent problem behaviors, reduce disciplinary removals, and increase overall student progress. The ARC may determine that this strategy is appropriate for an individual student and include it in the special factors of the IEP and/or the behavior intervention plan. If this pre-correction strategy is in the student's IEP or BIP, then the ARC will need to ensure they have addressed any other needs that may be required to be included in the IEP, such as training staff on the established expectations for behavior, how to reinforce, and how to respond by offering immediate and specific reinforcement. Here's an example. For a student who becomes overstimulated during assemblies, the staff needs to know to offer noise-canceling headphones prior to entering the gym, which would need to be documented in the special factors sections for behavior and in the assistive technology special factors. The program modifications and support section may include training the staff on the established expectations for behavior, how to reinforce and respond by offering immediate and specific reinforcement. The annual goals section would need to include goals to address the specific behavior or behaviors and goals to address the academic impact and be consistent with the special factors and BIP. These are just a few of the connections ARCs will need to consider as they develop the IEP. The present levels are the baseline to the student's strengths and needs. They are the beginning foundations for the ARC to build the IEP. As the ARC builds that IEP, the information and data provided in the present levels are going to connect and help the ARC to develop an appropriate IEP that includes all the pieces that connect in order for there to be progress documented and seen through the data. This puzzle piece graphic on the screen is an outline of a child's head with puzzle pieces in it. It does not depict every detailed piece of the IEP, but it is meant for you to visualize how all the pieces of the IEP will make up an individualized and appropriate program for students. The IEP should be compliant, comprehensive, and consistent throughout, which includes the special factors. Remember, if the ARC marks any of the special factors yes, such as behavior, it should be addressed throughout the entire IEP. If the ARC marks no in the behavior section of the special factors, then before the ARC marks reinforcement and behavior modification strategies as an accommodation or a supplementary aid in service, think about how that would be considered inconsistent if being monitored. Those accommodations and supplementary aids and services would suggest behavior is a factor and should be marked yes. Those behavior modifications and strategies are used to ensure a student is able to access their general curriculum. In order to ensure our puzzle pieces all fit together, we need to think through all the services and items the student will need to have access to in order to be successful within the school-wide environment. Using all pieces of data and information, a complete, compliant, and comprehensive IEP appropriate for the student can be developed by the ARC annually. Here are a couple of resources that may assist in learning more about the process and requirements related to the consideration of special factors, specifically behavior, in IEP development. Thank you for watching the IEP Consideration of Special Factors, Behavior Needs and Supports. The other parts in the series clarify how each section of the special factors in the IEP connect together to create a comprehensive, consistent, compliant, and effective program ensuring student growth. Specifically, we will look at regulatory requirements for each factor, along with guiding questions for the ARC and considering each factor, and how to ensure if the ARC marks any of the special factors yes, then those factors should be addressed throughout the entire IEP. If you have any questions regarding this series, please contact staff in the Division of IDEA Monitoring and Results at 502-564-4970.